everyone. So I'm going to walk you through creating a preliminary treatment plan. And the preliminary treatment plan is the one that's done at the time of assessment, and then it would be followed by a comprehensive and then an update treatment plan. So the preliminary treatment plan is only good for the first 14 days of a client's treatment episode or the first attended 3 services. So 3 services or 14 days, whichever one comes first, which is a little bit confusing because generally we're looking at treatment plans for comprehensive and updates that are due or are good for 60 days or due every 60 days. This one, it's a time frame and it's an amount of attended services that we have to be very mindful of. So just keep in mind that whole process there. But what you're going to do is, say you've just assessed somebody, you're going to go to client drop down, and you can go under intake assessment. The treatment plan is going to be under there right here, right above ASAM and psychosocial. So it really is organized in a way that we're probably doing all of these steps if we're doing a needs assessment or a telehealth assessment, and then we're going to transfer them to either OP or IOP or aftercare or whatever it's going to be. We're going to then do a treatment plan, an ASAM, and a psychosocial. So treatment plan, ASAM, psychosocial all need to be done for every single admitted intake. So we're going to start with treatment plan. And I'm just under a test client right now, so you can see that they have multiple other treatment plans. But you know, the last one was done in 2021, and maybe they're coming back for a new treatment episode. So this is where we're going to add a treatment plan. And this is just for the preliminary treatment plan. For a comprehensive or update, we would click that review button right here. But because this is a brand new treatment episode and we're starting from scratch, we're adding. And so any of these pink boxes, you want to make sure that you fill in. So treatment plan type, this is a preliminary, initial, or review. It's going to be initial, right? Because it's the first time that we are doing a treatment plan for this person in this treatment episode. Even though other treatment plans exist in their chart, it's preliminary and it's initial. And we're going to start it on the day of their assessment. So say I just met with this client for an assessment. Maybe they had a 9 a.m. assessment. I'm making a treatment plan for them. And it's just, if you just click in that box, it will auto-populate the current time. So today's 5/19, it is 9:43 right now. Number of days due in, so like I said, it's going to be 14 days. And if you just hit tab, once you type in that 14, again, it will auto-populate that for you. So you don't have to do any of the math or count forward 14 days or anything. It's going to tell you, okay, their next treatment plan is going to be due on June 2nd, which is 14 days from today. Or remember what I said, if they attend 3 treatment services within that 14 days or sooner than that 14 days, the next treatment plan is going to be due then. So today's Friday. Say I assessed somebody today and I said, you're going to start IOP on Monday, and they come on Monday, and then they also come on Tuesday, and then they also come on Thursday, and they are just really rocking IOP and doing everything that they should. Then they've attended 3 treatments right then. And so that means that, you know, on Thursday next week, that's when it's due. I don't actually get till the 2nd. I get until what it would be the 25th. So client program, usually you won't see multiples of these available. You might see pre-admit plus something else, but because we're in test client and they're active in multiple programs, it's given us a lot of options here. We're going to say that they're going to be an IOP client. So I'm going to check that box and I'm going to hit submit. And it's going to take me onto the next page, which is problems, goals, and objectives. And you'll notice it is blank. And so this might be the first time that you're seeing a treatment plan that has absolutely nothing in it. And that's why I'm here. We're going to help you build something from scratch. So what we're going to do right here is really the only option that you have is add problem. And so you're just going to add a problem. And so when we think about the organization of a treatment plan, at the very top, it's going to be a problem, and underneath that, it's going to be a goal. And underneath the goal will be multiple objectives to help that client meet the goal. And in each objective, there's going to be interventions and activities. So there's quite a lot of clicking and navigation that we're going to do together. But once you really get started doing it and seeing it all in action, I think it's going to make a lot of sense. So when we're adding a problem, we need to first select their primary diagnosis or their current diagnosis, or the one that we're really creating these goals around. So for this client right here, he's got a tobacco use disorder, a stimulant use disorder. He's been using cocaine. It looks like maybe there's a benzo use disorder in here. Maybe he's been using Xanax or Valium. And then there's also something going on here with caffeine. We don't see this one too often. But I'm going to say for the sake of this treatment plan, we're going to pick the cocaine use disorder as the primary. And now the problem type, we're just going to say cocaine use, because we want to be as specific as possible. If we picked stimulant use, that's fine. I think that would imply that maybe there's other stimulants in the mix too. But really, if this guy's only using cocaine, we would just say cocaine. The problem, you're going to select this from the dropdown. It's the only option, but what it's going to do is just auto-populate those words in the problem narrative. But we do just want to delete that because these words aren't actually specific to the client. So when we're thinking about a problem narrative, we want to be thinking about the client's words. This is their problem they're coming to treatment with. We want to do our best to make sure that we are taking their words and writing this narrative based on their language. It's not the problem that we're assessing, which can turn into pretty judgmental language, but it's the problem that they're saying that they have. So my client who's coming in for assessment with this cocaine use disorder might say something like, "Cocaine is ruining my life." And I'll put that in quotes, so it's very obvious that it's their words and not mine. I want to get a better house, fix things with my girlfriend, get a job, be a productive member of society. I don't know if anybody would actually say that, but this one said it. And maybe they might say something along the lines of, "Cocaine is ruining my relationships and my mental health." So you can stop here, or you can keep going if you want and just kind of talk about, what evidence do you have to support? And all of this is going to be coming from the assessment that you did with them. So it might be really important to be taking these quotes or writing these verbatim statements down word for word in the assessment so that when you're coming to the problem narrative and you're using the client's language to describe the problem that they believe that they have, that you're using their own words and you're not kind of trying to remember, "Oh, what did they say about this?" You have it written down in the assessment. So you might continue to say, "Client reports to using cocaine on a daily basis and is having significant relationship troubles. Girlfriend is threatening to break up and move out. Client is working as a laborer." You can see I'm really not spelling things very great. Okay, so all I did here, and this is also a fun little trick. See these little dots down here? You can drag this down and make this box bigger. So we can kind of really look at it all together. If you like looking and typing into small boxes, you can make it as small as you want to, but we're going to drag it out and look at it. So we have client statements up at the top, and then we have what client's reporting to the assessor and just adding a little bit more detail or content and context to the problem narrative. You might also want to talk about maybe a goal here of client recognizes the need for psych services. So I'm realizing I'm not good at talking and typing at the same time, so I'm just going to stop trying. So right here, we're putting a little blip in here about how he has a previous mental health diagnosis and maybe the cocaine is really exasperating it quite a bit and he needs to get in touch with a psychiatrist, whether internally or externally, to get the bipolar disorder under control. The other thing that I would look at here, and I'm doing this for the sake of, because I'm using test client and a practice client, but you do want to make sure that because we're individualizing this treatment plan to every single person, that we want to make sure that we are actually using their name. So I'm actually, I think, maybe doing this wrong right now, and I'm going to go back and change everywhere where I say the client, and I'm just going to put their name in. We'll just call this client Jeff because it's only 4 letters and it's easy to type. So everywhere where I'm saying client, I'm just going to go in and replace with Jeff's name, practice Jeff. So we're good to go with this. And now this status, you can say in progress if you want, or you can just leave it blank. It's sort of up to you. You don't want to say met because it's the preliminary treatment plan. Like, how did they already meet the goal? Like, it's day 1. So again, either leave it blank or just in progress. And then you're going to save the problem and you'll see that it's going to populate on my screen. Problems populated on the screen, we have quite a bit of information to go off of. And because the treatment plan is this working collaborative document with the client, we're definitely not going to write anything in here that we wouldn't say to the client or the client doesn't actually know about themselves. This isn't a time for an assessment or talking about, what they're not good at. This is the time to talk about, here's the problem you're identifying and here's how we can help you. So speaking of here's how we can help you, you're going to add a goal. So all of these goals are attached to that diagnosis drop down in the previous page that we did with the problem. So these goals might look a little bit different depending on what diagnosis you have. So if you have somebody with alcohol use disorder or opioid use disorder, the goals are going to look a little bit different because they're going to offer you options for medicated assisted treatment. Because I chose cocaine, there's no MAT options out there for somebody with cocaine use disorder at this time. So those options just aren't part of a goal. It's not like I can say yeah, they're going to do Suboxone or they're going to do Vivitrol, because that's not aligned with cocaine use disorder. If you have a client who's going to do Suboxone or Vivitrol, you want to make sure that you're choosing either opioid use disorder or alcohol use disorder on that diagnosis drop down in the previous page to give you those options for goal. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this terminate cocaine use and establish recovery pattern that includes therapeutic support. That's the goal that I'm working from. This increased client retention and completion of treatment in order to move client forward, blah, 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 blah. This is more a goal aligned with maybe peer support or CRS services only, but I'm going to choose the one that's talking about therapeutic support because we're referring this client to therapy. So you can just click it, you can leave it as is. You can add it if you want. Maybe you kind of forgot to go backwards and choose the correct diagnosis. Maybe this client is also going to do Vivitrol, or we can say something about psych services in here too. And again, we want to make sure that we're using their name. So good old Jeff, I'm writing about him. And again, status, you can do in progress. Again, I wouldn't do met because it's the preliminary. They haven't met this yet. You can leave review date blank. You can leave all of these boxes blank right now because we're going to get into the nitty gritty. We're going to use all of these when we get to the objective. So again, I'm going to save the goal. It's going to populate on the page. And I think sometimes the worst thing about CareLogic is how long it takes to refresh. Sometimes it works to have another tab or another window open, and maybe you're working on the ASAM or the psychosocial at the same time that you're doing the treatment plan. And in a perfect world, what you're doing is you're doing the treatment plan and the ASAM together side by side at the same time, because what you're identifying in the ASAM as far as what the client may need to succeed in treatment, you want to make sure that you're putting in the treatment plan and that you're talking with them about social support and relapse prevention and stages of change and motivation and their mental health and their physical health and maybe their withdrawal or their detox needs, right? So none of what we're writing in an ASAM should be a secret to the client, and it should also be reflected in the treatment plan as things that they're working on. So again, if you can do it at the same time, that's what's ideal. Sometimes I like to do the ASAM first, just so I have a guide of where I think I need the treatment plan to go to cover all of their needs. So we have problem, we have goal. The next thing that we're doing is adding an objective, and you can kind of see how they're layered underneath each one. The objective is going to be layered underneath the goal too. And so we're going to add an objective, and you can see there are tons and tons of pre-populated lists. The list just keeps going down and down. For the most part, it's going to be in alphabetical order, but the main ones that are numbered, so it's 1 through 9, these ones that I'm highlighting right here, these are the ones that most people are going to use. And so when we're building this preliminary treatment plan from scratch, we want to pay extra special attention to these numbered ones. They're at the top, they're numbered for you, for your ease of finding them, to make sure that they are going to be populated in almost everybody's treatment plan. But because treatment plans are also individualized and reflecting ASAM needs, we want to make sure that we're choosing the ones that are appropriate for them and maybe adding additional ones if we feel like, we've talked about them, or maybe the client has talked about those additional needs. So we're going to start with 1. Client will abstain from all illicit and mood-altering substance use, and notice that it's an abstinence-based objective. But what if they're doing harm reduction? You can change the wording on there by scrolling all the way down and editing it in the pink. So you might say, so that's okay for a harm reduction goal, or we can just kind of go back and click it again. So client will abstain, and it's going to change my words again. So back to abstain. Or there actually is a harm reduction objective in here. It's right here in the alphabetical part if you want to click that instead. So it's important to know, does your client want to do a total abstinence route? Do they want to follow a harm reduction route? You need to know this when you're making a treatment plan, because if their goal is harm reduction and you're saying, you must abstain completely, then already the treatment plan is failing them. They're not going to be able to reach that objective because it's not their objective. So we want to make sure that the treatment plan is reflective of what the client wants to do. This is client-centered treatment. So it should be their words, it should be their goals, it should be things that we're talking about with them. So I'm going to leave this one. We're going to say Jeff, he wants to abstain from cocaine. And so again, we want to replace 01 in client with Jeff, because this is for him. It's not just for any client, it's for Jeff. We're going to say status in progress. The target date is an interesting thing. Notice that it's pink, so it has to be filled out. So the target date can be the date that is 14 days from now, but realistically, when we're talking about Jeff abstaining, that's probably going to take a little bit of a longer time than 14 days to actually track. So usually what I'll do is I'll pick today's date and I'll add a year out, because I'm thinking, hopefully Jeff, for the most best services from us to build his recovery capital, it's probably going to take about a year, I hope. Maybe more, maybe less, give or take. You can change this target date in the future, but I think for me, it's just a year is a good jumping off point. And then you're going to select the responsible party. And so this is going to be the therapist that you are assigning Jeff's treatment to. And so if you just did his assessment, maybe you're keeping him for yourself and he's going to jump into your own IOP. So in that case, I would be selecting me. I did his assessment. He's going to come to my IOP on Monday. I'm going to click my name, or maybe I'm referring him to somebody else. I'm going to send him over to Leanna. So progress towards objective, for the preliminary one, you can leave blank because you just met him. You can type in this box if you want to. Maybe you have a little bit more information about the progress being made. Maybe just saying like, so that's a good little piece of information that, if it's not me, I'm not referring him to me, I'm referring him to somebody else. Leanna's going to see this in 14 days or sooner when she reviews the treatment plan, and she's, if she didn't get a chance to read through the eval yet or really talk to Jeff about anything, she's going to see a little note about how he's already doing with this objective, and she might be able to add to it at that point too. So you have some options here. You can do save objective, which will shoot you back to that initial page, and you'll see it kind of building underneath problem goal. You'll see this first objective in here. Or you can click this box, add another objective, and it will just take you back to that list. So for the sake of just seeing everything being built on the screen, I'm just going to click save objective for now so that you can see it thinking. And then it's going to populate this magical list. So problem goal, objectives right here where I said it was going to be. And so now we have a little bit more of options. We're going to have multiple objectives underneath this goal. We're probably only going to have one goal under problem. So problem, goal, objectives. And underneath objectives, there's going to be interventions and activities. So this is where you can kind of create your own pathway of what makes the most sense to you. You can build out every single thing underneath every single objective if you want, or you can build all the objectives first and then go back and add interventions and activities. What I like to do is build out all my objectives and then add the interventions and activities. So I'm going to go back to add objective. I know we already did this abstinence one. We're going to do this groups one. So I'm checking it, and then I'm scrolling down to the bottom. Again, I'm going to make this super specific to him. So I'm saying Jeff, not just client, but Jeff will attend all scheduled group and individual therapy sessions. And then it's prompting you right here. You want to delete this and you want to list their actual treatment schedule. So we're going to say Leanna IOP. She doesn't actually even have an IOP anymore, but I'm just making this up. We're going to say that her IOP is Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 10 to 1:10 p.m. So that's the group schedule that Jeff is expected to attend, plus at least one individual. So that's the session. Status, it's in progress. Target date, again, I'm going to push it out to a year. And again, I'm choosing Leanna for this one. So this time, I could save objective and go right back to that home screen and see it kind of populating. Or instead of doing that, this is a little bit faster. Now that you know how this works, I'm going to click this yes, add another objective, save objective, and it's going to take me back to that big list. So I'm just going to keep going down because he did also mention psych services. So Jeff will schedule and attend psych service. So again, it says coordinate and schedule psych services by comprehensive treatment planning session. So you have 14 days basically to schedule this psych eval. So I'm just going to delete that because I know that's true. And we're going to say it's in progress. We're pushing it out to a year. Saying Leanna. Nope, did that one wrong. Now we're saying Leanna. And we're going to say maybe in here is Jeff reported. So I'm not necessarily going to diagnose him with bipolar 1 as part of the assessment. I might not have enough information to support that, but I do want to document that he reported it and it is kind of floating around out there. Maybe I'm going to have him sign a consent so that I can get in contact with another provider, counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever diagnosed him, or wherever he might be active. Or when I set him up for the psych eval, our internal psychiatrist will be able to make that diagnosis themselves. So again, I'm going to click yes, save objective, takes me back to this big list. So we did 1, 2, and 3. Aftercare discharge planning, again, this is another one that every single person's going to get. So far we haven't gotten to the super individualized part yet. At some point, just play around in here and read about what all of these actually say, because I don't want to waste your time by reading them to you right now. But we're just going to build this out together. This is the one that I always talk about as far as the step down objective in IOP. So in IOP, before they step down, I want to make sure that they are making progress on building coping skills, relapse prevention, community support, and emotional self-care. If they're not making progress on these 4 sort of pillars of treatment, then it's probably not time for them to step down. And again, because this is a collaborative, working, living document with this client, these are things that we are going to talk about, within their first 14 days or every 60 days at least thereafter when we review this treatment plan together. So they're going to know what we're looking for. And it's this ongoing discussion of, hey, IOP is not for forever. Here's the things that you need to do and you need to accomplish to be able to step down. Show me progress in coping skills, relapse prevention, community support, and emotional self-care. And as long as they know that and you're talking about this, it's never going to be a question of, oh my God, when can I step down from IOP? Because they know when they can. They know what the goals in front of them are. Save objective. Here we go. Psych follow-ups. So because they're going to do psych services with us, we also need to check that box for psych follow-ups. And again, we want to make sure that we're changing this to Jeff. And you might see that, it's not a year out. It might be, 60 days, 30 days, 14 days or something. But when you're going into review for a comprehensive or anything, you want to make sure that you have enough time in that target date. You don't ever want this target date to expire if the person's still active in treatment or still working on this objective. Because if the target date expires, it basically means time's up. So you can keep extending it as you're seeing progress towards objectives being made or not being made. All right, case management, or CRS. So pretty much everybody should have a CRS being offered to them. We'll say for the sake of this, Jeff is accepting CRS services. It's in progress, target date a year from now. And so this is where, you could put whoever the therapist's name is. Ultimately, they're responsible for making sure that this person is getting access to all of the services being offered by JADE, or if you know exactly which CRS that this person is being referred to, you can choose their name on the dropdown. So we'll say that, here we go, we'll say Sandy is the CRS here. So here we go. We're going to save. It's taking us back to that list. Strengths, again, we're talking about client-centered, strength-based treatment planning. So we always want to make sure that we're adding this strengths objective in. And I know that as I'm talking and adding more and more, this starts to seem pretty overwhelming of this is already a pretty long treatment plan and I haven't even touched the specific things for them yet. It's okay. The preliminary, we are just building the bare bones. The comprehensive can be the one where the therapist is responsible for actually adding very specific things in. The preliminary one, we just want to make sure that we are catching all of maybe the basics here. If you have time as an evaluator, if you have time to build out this really killer treatment plan, go ahead and take the time and maybe save yourself time in the future, or save the other therapist a little bit of time. So right here, we're going to take out all that mumbo jumbo that doesn't belong, and we're going to personalize this. So we want to make sure that we're using the correct pronouns. So Jeff will identify and incorporate his strengths and abilities in order to promote success and empower the client in reaching, I like to say, his goals. If we know that they go by he, him, we should include the pronouns. And these strengths include, in your assessment, there already was a section where you talked about strengths and weaknesses. So you can pull up your assessment side by side, or maybe you jotted down a couple notes for your sanity and ease, and you can just add those in there. So they can be the strengths that the client directly reported that they had, or maybe they're strengths that you observed the client to have. And sometimes that's a little bit nicer too, because if they're really struggling to identify strengths, then it's good to hand them some of, I just met you and I saw all these great things about you. So we're going to say willingness, honesty, determination, sense of humor. We'll just say Jeff's a real funny guy. Okay, so here we go. Add another objective. This one is a little optional, so if they identified a history of trauma, you do want to make sure that you select this trauma one. Or if they identified wanting to quit smoking, you also want to select tobacco cessation as treatment objectives. We'll say, for the sake of just moving along, that Jeff didn't report any of this. We do want to check telemedicine though, because this one's the one that will give them access to being able to participate in any of the Zoom or DoxyMe services. So we'll say, again, a year out, what, and maybe this is a great time to make a little note. So, the therapist that is going to have Jeff on the caseload knows, evaluator, train Jeff on DoxyMe. So Leanna's going to know, hey, I had this conversation with this guy about this. So I'm going to click yes and save again. Okay, so we got through all of these main objectives that are numbered that we want to make sure that we want to hit. And you can stop here and move on if you want, or you can keep scrolling down this list and looking for anything that you discussed with Jeff as far as treatment objectives or things that he wants to work on in treatment. We'll say, maybe he also reported to gambling. Cocaine use disorder and gambling tend to go hand in hand, so it's probably pretty likely that you had this conversation. So we're going to add a gambling objective just for the sake of it. And you can keep doing that. You can keep going and going and going. I'm going to hit save objective. I'm going to stop here and I'm just going to show you what's going on, because part of a treatment plan is, notice how we have 9 objectives in here. That's a lot. We don't want to have something with 20 objectives or even 15. I think 9 is probably, maybe close to the top. Maybe we could do 10 or 11 if it's somebody that has a lot of high needs. Maybe if they're in a partial program or an IOP, something very intensive, they probably are going to have more objectives and more things that they're working on. If somebody is in OP or aftercare, they should be meeting or completing some of these objectives while they're working through treatment. So those are going to fall off at some point during a comprehensive or a review. But you just don't want the treatment plan to be too overwhelming, or for it to seem like, oh man, I'm never going to meet all of these. So again, maybe we want to stop at 9 or 10. So if you haven't been working alongside this video to build out the treatment plan, I'm going to just have you pause right here and maybe open up your CareLogic screen and start to build it out yourself. Or maybe pause me and come back when you've gotten this far, just so you can get the feel and the hang of it. Because I think the next part is the really tedious part, and it's easy to get lost in this because there's so many buttons to click, so many places. But go ahead, pause, come back. So once you've built out all of these objectives, what you're going to do is, for every single one of them, so again, you have to do this 9 times. For every single one, we're going to add interventions, and then we're going to add activities. And notice here we're in status. You want to make sure that it's saying in progress all the way down. This can change in the future, but for the sake of the preliminary treatment plan, every single one should be in progress. So for objective 1, we're going to add an intervention. and it's going to pre-populate. So all of these interventions are tied to the objective. So there's abstain interventions tied to the abstain objectives. So you're going to choose the one that seems to make the most sense for the client. I don't ever really like doing these ones that are at the top that are numbered. They definitely do fit with the purposes of the preliminary treatment plan, but they're not really the sort of long-term interventions that a client might be working on or the therapist might be working on with the client. So something more likely that would be a little bit long-term would be, these bottom two ones of examining random drug screens to monitor continued abstinence. I think that one is an option. I think this last one sounds a little bit more therapeutic and maybe potentially the most helpful. So I'm usually clicking this one, but again, that's up to your therapist judgment of which ones that you click. So again, target date, same rules apply as before. We want to push that out for a time in the future. For me, I usually push it out a year, and then the responsible party is the same. So you can add another intervention underneath this. So, it's not going to take you back to that big list of objectives. It's going to take you back to this intervention list. So maybe there's multiple interventions that you see in here. Maybe you also want this random drug screen one. You only need to have one intervention per objective. So it's not like there's a requirement to add multiple, but you can if you want to. So for the sake of just showing you, I'm going to add that one about monitoring drug screen results so you can just see what it looks like. So you can see now there's two of these interventions underneath this one objective, underneath this goal. Now, for these ones, we're also going to add activities underneath each one, but for the sake of this, we're just going to add interventions all the way down, and then we'll go back and add activities all the way down. So again, like I said, it's a little tedious because it keeps building and building and building, and so for every one, it's almost like a pyramid. You're going to have multiple things happening underneath it. So if we're moving on to objective 2, and this is the one about group attendance, we're adding an intervention. And again, these top ones that are numbered, they're fine. They're great for a preliminary treatment plan, but they're only good for a preliminary treatment plan. You do need to make sure that it's being changed at a comprehensive. And so what I usually like to do is set up the therapist that's going to have this client for success and choose something that's going to be a little bit more long-term. So the objectives are about what the client's going to do. The interventions are going to be about what the therapist is going to do. And you'll see the activities are going to be the actual billable activities that support that intervention underneath that objective. So this one, if you ever forget which one you click on, the objectives listed right at the top. So this one's going to be about psych services. So we're going to say for this one, we're going to say that the therapist is going to monitor co-occurring conditions and constructively address, because that's pretty vague and that could mean a lot, but maybe that might also include internal referral to a psychiatrist, which would be this last one down here. Or maybe if they have an external therapist, they're going to coordinate care with that external therapist. There's a lot of options here, but I think for the sake of just showing you this, I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to save, and we'll just keep going. I finished all of them because I figured that you watching me do it, there's only so many times that you can watch me do the same thing and you're just going to stop learning. So again, do it yourself, work side by side, try to fill it out yourself, but here's what it's going to look like after every single objective has an intervention. So it's pretty easy to see, if one was missing, you'd be able to notice because there wouldn't be an indentation underneath that objective. But it looks like we are good to go. If you ever want to expand any of them, you can click this little arrow and it will expand, so you'll be able to see the target date, if there's progress towards objective. You can also expand the interventions too to see the same stuff, or you can collapse by hitting that again. So you can expand it all out if you want. I think for me it's just too many words, too much information all at once. If I'm going to expand, I'm going to expand one at a time, or I'm just going to click somewhere on the text and it'll just open that again and I can type in here if I want to. So the next step is adding activities underneath every single intervention. So remember how an objective one, I put 2 interventions under here. There needs to be activities under each of these, but for every other one, there's only 1 intervention underneath each objective. So we're just going to hit activities for each of these, once. So activities, like I said, these are sort of the billable services that we are going to use to support that client in meeting that intervention underneath that objective, underneath that goal, underneath that problem. So again, I clicked that intervention about abstaining and the therapist exploring psychological and physical dependency on cocaine. So, in a therapy session, where might that happen? I'm thinking that might happen in an individual session, in an intensive IOP session, maybe in a telehealth, maybe in an intensive telehealth session. It's very possible that it could happen in all of these other things that are options to check, but we're probably going to check those boxes somewhere else. I think when you think about the interventions, you have to think about what's going to be the best fit. And so when we're talking about the therapist doing it, the therapist really only sees them in individuals and in groups. So we're going to check that. We're going to save activities. So you can see, again, it's built underneath here, and then we're going to go down to this one about examining random drug screens to monitor abstinence. So again, we can duplicate a little bit. That might happen in individual sessions. There might be conversations about urines in groups. I would recommend not to do that because it does violate some level of confidentiality. If you're talking about specific clients' drug results in a group setting, they would have to bring it up. You're probably not going to bring it up, but it might be a conversation that you're having. You do want to check this urinalysis box too. So that's something that can happen, especially if it's a federal client. For Jeff, we'll just assume maybe he is, just for the sake of being able to check the box. There's also a urine drug screen that's offered at time of assessment. So we're going to maybe click that box too. Maybe we're also talking about it in family therapy. So again, you might want to get really familiar with these lists to be able to see which boxes you're going to want to check for each one. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. I think it's just a little overwhelming with, there's so many words on each page and so many things that you need to do. But go ahead and you can save. And again, for the preliminary, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be a good jump start for the therapist who's getting this client to work from, and something that's going to cover them in the first 14 days of treatment. So this one's about groups. So again, we want to make sure that we're checking the group boxes. So IOP, both in-person and telehealth. Psych services, we want to make sure we're checking anything that says psych in here. I usually just always check the groups just because I want to make sure I never miss them. So I'm probably going a little bit overboard with the groups, but psych eval looks to be important. Nurse only visit is probably pretty important too. Just in the event that a doctor calls off, or maybe there's an emergency that happens and the nurse is more available than a doctor, we want to make sure that this person's going to be covered for a nurse only visit. And maybe an easier way to remember this too is when an insurance company comes in and audits a client's chart and looks at their treatment plan, they can deny claims for anything that wasn't checked on their treatment plan. Maybe at some point this client is going to do family therapy, but we never clicked that box on there. The insurance company can come in and say, you know what, we're not paying for that. You didn't say that the family therapy was a part of their treatment plan. So you do always want to make sure that when you're looking at a treatment plan, whatever you think we might bill for in the future for this client is going to be checked. I know I already checked family treatment somewhere else, so I'm just going to uncheck it because it doesn't really seem to make a ton of sense in this one. But again, I'm looking for all of the possible, looks good to me. So I'm hitting save. Okay, so I sped that up so you don't have to stare at me doing this again. It's a little bit tedious because there's a lot to check and there's a lot to move through. But now you can see that this is a good looking treatment plan. It looks done. There's activities underneath every intervention, underneath every objective. We can see that there's 9 objectives all the way down here. And again, if you miss something in the preliminary, not the hugest deal. Hopefully the therapist will catch it in the comprehensive or any of the updates, or if the client's just going to end up being yours, you can make a note to make sure that you're catching it too. We're double checking. I'm looking through. It's all there. And I just want to give you a little hint as far as what I do is because we often miss family therapy in here. I usually make sure that I'm adding it underneath the strengths one because I'm thinking about how family members can help support a client in their strengths when they're coming in for family sessions. So I always make sure in activities that I add family therapy in addition to the group and individuals too. So I make sure that I don't miss the family therapy activities at any point, but I know that I put it up at the top somewhere too. It's okay if some of these are duplicated, we just don't want to miss one. So the next step, we can hit continue at the top and it's going to take us to our signature page. In the most ideal world, you have built this out with the client in front of your face. You're talking about every single thing that you're doing and every single thing that you're adding to the treatment plan. But as you might notice, I talked to you a lot throughout this, so I think that I took a lot longer than I needed to. You could probably fly through making one of these preliminary treatment plans in 5-10 minutes if you knew what you were doing and you knew where all the boxes to check were. But that's still a really long time, I think, for a client at the end of an assessment to be sitting and waiting. So you can build out a treatment plan while you're working on consents with them, so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone and do the same things together. Or I think more often what I'm seeing is that you're talking about what will be on the treatment plan with the client so that they're informed and they have a say on what's in the treatment plan. And then after they leave, you'll do the treatment plan along with your ASAM and your psychosocial all together. So in the perfect world, you're doing it side by side, which means you can also grab a signature from them at that time. They sign, you send to Dr. Allen, and it works out perfectly. If you don't have enough time to be doing it side by side with them, you do want to make sure that you do it separately, that you sign, that you send it to Dr. Allen for a second signature, and that you're also putting a note on their message board saying that they need to sign their preliminary treatment plan from whatever date. So my message board note would say, Jeff needs to sign his treatment plan from assessment on May 19th, 2023, and then the front desk will grab that signature, or the therapist will grab the signature when they see Jeff again. And the therapist will take that time in the first individual session to really walk through the treatment plan in a more comprehensive view. So for the sake of this, I'm going to sign it. I'm going to send it to Dr. Allen. I'm going to leave this in test client's chart. So if you ever want to look back on what I built, it's test client with the unique client number 2572. So you can always take a look at this one from May 19th, 2023. If you want to, you can feel free to review if you're practicing with your comprehensives or your updates or whatever it may be. Feel free to play around with that, but also just play around with your own preliminary treatment plan build out. Thanks so much. Feel free to email me if you have any questions at all about this process. I am happy to answer. I know it's just a lot to navigate all at once. The more you do it, the easier it will get, though.